You don't always get a warning before your world turns upside down. One second you're just trying to survive the cold, the dark, the endless loneliness, and the next you're running for your life. That's exactly where Rory found herself tonight. Rory Kane, exiled, hunted, wounded, running through a forest that felt alive with menace. Snow mixed with rain pelted her face, stinging like shards of glass. Her leg throbbed, the pain from that cursed hunter's trap screaming in time with her heart. Every step was agony, every breath a struggle, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She didn't even have the luxury of thinking about why. Twisting, ancient trees loomed overhead, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky, rattling with the wind. A thick fog swallowed the world in front of her. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, couldn't be sure if the shadows moving in that fog were just branches or predators. Her mind screamed at her to slow down, to be careful, but her body refused. Survival had a way of taking over when fear clenched you like iron. And fear, Rory knew, was nothing compared to the storm she carried inside her. There was something burning under her skin, something ancient, something she hadn't fully learned to control. Her hands, shaking from cold and exhaustion, flickered with silver fire, tiny sparks that hissed and spat like living things. Every time she tried to focus, the fire threatened to leap higher, threatening to burn her, threatening to burn everything around her. He hated it. He hated that she was dangerous. That she was too much. Her breath came out ragged, a mist swirling in the night air mixing with the snow. She could feel the pulse of the forest around her, could hear the crunch of her own boots on frozen earth, and behind that the faintest whisper of other boots, other presences. Shadows she couldn't quite see moved with intent, stalking her, circling her, waiting for the moment when she faltered. Rory wanted to cry, wanted to scream, but she forced herself not to. She had to stay ahead. She had to survive even if she didn't know why anymore. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the forest in white brilliance for just a heartbeat. She froze in place, her chest heaving, her heart hammering like a drum inside her ribs. And for a moment in that flash she saw them. Not clearly. Not completely. But the shapes were there. Figures moving silently, shadows that didn't belong to the trees, their eyes glinting in the brief light. Rivals. Predators. Hunters. Pack members she hadn't seen in years, or perhaps only imagined. Her throat went dry. She couldn't scream. She couldn't run fast enough. She stumbled. Pain lanced through her leg, a sharp, cruel reminder of her trap. The silver fire in her hands surged in response, wild, untamed. Sparks danced along her fingers, lighting the fog like stars in miniature, and she felt the heat burn her palms despite the cold. Panic clawed its way up her throat, threatening to overwhelm her. She wanted to control it. She needed to control it. But every time she tried, the fire leapt further, responding not to her will, but to her fear, her desperation, her rage. Her thoughts spiraled. Why did this happen to me? Why no? Why can't I just be normal? But she wasn't normal. She hadn't been normal since the day her own pack had cast her out, told her she was too dangerous, too unpredictable. Maybe she was. Maybe she really was too much. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of wet earth, of blood, and something else. Something old, ancient, primal. Rory shivered, knowing in her bones that she was being hunted. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. A branch snapped behind her, loud in the silence that had fallen over the forest like a weight. She spun, her silver flames flickering brighter in reflex. The shapes in the fog froze just for a moment as though acknowledging her presence, and then they moved again, deliberate, silent, unrelenting. Rory swallowed hard, tasting blood, fear, and determination all at once. This wasn't just survival. This was a fight for something she didn't even fully understand, herself. She ran faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring the chill that threatened to steal her breath. Her heart pounded like a drumbeat echoing through the trees. Every sense was alive, sharp, tense. Every nerve screamed at her to keep moving, to keep breathing, to not give up. And in the pit of her stomach she felt it, that tiny spark of hope, fragile but persistent. A whisper telling her she could survive. She could live. She could be something more than what they told her she was. The forest seemed endless, twisting and turning, mocking her. Snow fell harder, the storm more vicious, like the world itself was against her. And yet the silver fire in her hands responded to her fear, her determination, glowing brighter with every step, flickering like a heartbeat. She wanted to collapse, to let herself fall into the darkness and let the hunters find her. But something inside her, something deep, untamed, unbroken, refused. And then she saw it. A faint light in the distance, barely visible through the fog and snow, but real. A promise. A chance. She didn't know what waited there, didn't know if it would be salvation or more danger. But she ran toward it anyway. Because she had no other choice. Survival demanded it. Her life demanded it. And deep down Rory knew that somewhere ahead something, or someone, was waiting for her. The snow whipped against her face, her lungs burned, her hands crackled with silver fire, and still she ran. Every instinct, every muscle, every shred of willpower pushed her forward. And in that chaos, in that storm, in that night where the world itself seemed to rise against her, Rory Kane ran not just for her life, but for the fire that burned inside her, wild and untamed, waiting for the right moment to ignite. So if you love stories that make your heart race, that pull you into a world where love, danger, and power collide, stay with me. Because this is only the beginning. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections and step into a world where hearts burn, where fire lives in the veins of the bold, and where survival is just the first step toward discovering who you really are. Rory's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps, fogging the air in front of her. Her muscles screamed for release, her leg burned with every desperate step, but she refused to slow down. Behind her, the snapping of branches, faint but deliberate, whispered that the hunt wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She could feel eyes in the darkness watching her, waiting for the moment she faltered. And yet, just when the weight of exhaustion threatened to drag her into the cold, merciless ground, she sensed something different. A presence. Strong. Heavy. Alive. Not human. Not entirely. It rippled through the forest, a tension in the air she couldn't quite place, like the quiet before a storm that isn't announced by lightning or thunder but by something deeper, something ancient, waiting. Rory froze mid-step, silver fire flickering faintly in her trembling hands. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, loud enough that she was sure anyone, or anything, could hear it. And then, she saw him. Grayson Wolfe. The name echoed in her mind before she even knew it consciously. He emerged from the shadows as if he had stepped from the night itself, a figure carved from the dark, moonlight catching the silver streaks along his fur, glinting like frost on black steel. He moved with an effortless, terrifying grace, every motion precise, controlled but carrying the weight of centuries. There was a quiet dominance in him, something that didn't demand attention, but demanded obedience of the soul. Rory wanted to look away, wanted to run, but couldn't. Her instincts screamed danger, but a strange pull, a magnetic tug, kept her rooted. He stopped a few yards away, tall, imposing, eyes glinting like amber caught in firelight. He didn't move closer, but the air between them was taut, charged with something Rory couldn't name. Furious. Fear and fascination, and the prickling awareness of something far older than either of them. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Rory swallowed hard, tasting blood and ice and the tang of snow, trying to steady the tremble running through her body. Then his gaze shifted, sharpened, and for the first time he looked at her. Really looked. Not like a predator looking at prey, not like a stranger passing by, but as if he had known her for a long time, longer than she had even existed in the mind of the world. Rory Kane, he said, his voice low, resonant, carrying over the pounding of her own pulse, the howling of the wind. Just her name, spoken simply, and yet it struck her like a blow, echoing something deep in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Recognition, acknowledgement, the terrifying possibility of trust. Her muscles tensed, every fiber screaming to flee. He had to be dangerous. Everything about him screamed danger. Yet the danger didn't make her run. It rooted her in place, shaking, trembling, fire dancing along her hands in response to her tension. His eyes were sharp, assessing, wary. There was something guarded there, a wall centuries thick, built to hide pain, secrets, regrets. But there was something else too, something Rory couldn't deny. A faint, magnetic pull, like a gravity that tugged at her chest and her very bones. Before she could react, he shifted, the movement fluid, unnerving. The forest seemed to blur around him, his form expanding, silver fur catching every shard of moonlight, highlighting muscles honed by centuries of survival. He was no ordinary alpha. He was something else entirely, something ancient and commanding and impossible to ignore. And yet, in that commanding presence there was care. A strange, guarded care that she felt even before he said another word. He stepped closer, deliberately but not threateningly. Every step he took was careful, as though testing the limits of the forest, testing her limits, measuring the distance between danger and salvation. Rory's heart raced uncontrollably, not just from fear, not just from the cold, not just from the pain in her leg, but from the raw, overwhelming presence of him. Her instincts screamed for caution, yet her chest ached with a dangerous curiosity she didn't understand. And then the forest shifted. A branch snapped closer this time, and instinctively Rory braced herself. But Grayson's hand, warm, steady, impossibly strong, grasped hers, just enough to anchor her in place without pulling, without breaking her independence. "Move," he said, voice low, almost a growl, but with a strange softness buried inside it, like he was speaking directly to the frightened part of her soul. "Not far. Not yet." And somehow that was enough. Rory obeyed. Trust, something she hadn't allowed herself in years, flared in her chest like a fragile ember. She wanted to pull away, to run, to reject the tether he offered. But her body refused. Her fire reacted, her silver flames pulsing lightly as if acknowledging the presence of someone who might understand them, someone who might see her for what she truly was and not what the world had told her she should be. The wind whistled, cold and cruel, carrying with it the scents of the forest and the ghosts of packs long dead, and Grayson moved with her, guiding her without leading, shadow and moonlight and strength all at once. He didn't explain. He didn't say why he was here, why he had been watching, why he knew her name and yet let her keep some measure of control. He didn't have to. The tension, the unspoken words, the gravity between them said more than any explanation ever could. Her mind raced. Who was he really? Why no? Why had he come for her? And beneath that, in the quiet spaces of her chest where the panic still thudded, a whisper. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Every step they took together, Rory could feel the electricity between them. Fear mixed with fascination, mistrust with an almost unbearable pull toward him. And she knew, even without words, that this was only the beginning. This alpha, this Grayson Wolfe, carried centuries of secrets, burdens heavier than she could imagine. And somehow, for reasons she couldn't name, she wanted to know them all. The forest seemed to bend around them, snow still falling, wind still biting, but the presence of him, the way he moved, the way he was, made the world pause. The hunters, the shadows, the threat, they seemed less immediate, less final. Not gone. Not defeated. But manageable. Because here in this moment Rory Kane wasn't running alone anymore. And yet, beneath the faint spark of relief, the pulse of her silver fire, there was tension. She knew better than anyone that salvation often came wrapped in danger. That attraction, that curiosity, that pull she felt toward him could just as easily lead to betrayal, to heartbreak, to fire consuming everything in its path. But she couldn't stop it. She couldn't deny it. And as Grayson's amber eyes locked with hers, she understood a truth she hadn't expected. Some connections are forged not by choice but by fate, and sometimes fate doesn't ask for permission. And in that charged silence, with wind slicing through the branches and snow whirling like tiny ghosts, Rory realized something else. He was drawn to him. Drawn in ways she had no right to be. Drawn to the danger, the mystery, the power he radiated, the centuries of secrets held in his gaze. And in that realization, something deep inside her shifted, trembling, awakening, ready to respond. The night stretched on, long and cold, but in the space between fear and fascination, between survival and surrender, Rory Kane felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long, long time. A spark of hope. A whisper of trust. A dangerous, magnetic pull toward a man who might be her salvation, or the fire that consumed her. And even as they moved deeper into the forest together, every step cautious, every breath measured, she couldn't stop thinking, I don't know who he really is. But I can't turn away. I can't run from this. Because Grayson Wolfe had arrived. And nothing would ever be the same. The forest had grown quieter around them, though the storm still raged above, snow and rain battering the treetops. Rory's breaths were uneven, her leg throbbing, but the relentless pull of the silver fire beneath her skin demanded attention. It wasn't just a power, it was a presence, a weight, a history she couldn't escape. And yet, standing beside Grayson Wolfe, moving cautiously through the darkened underbrush, she felt seen. For the first time in years, someone wasn't afraid of what she was. Someone wasn't recoiling from her fire. But that didn't make the memories stop. They came crashing in like tidal waves she had been holding back for far too long. She remembered the day her pack had cast her out. Silverfang clan, proud, fierce, loyal, and utterly unforgiving. They called her dangerous, unpredictable, a threat they couldn't risk. They didn't understand that her fire wasn't meant to harm. It simply was. It was part of her, part of a legacy they had been too scared to embrace. She had been a child then, no more than 10 winters old, small and trembling and already different. The other Omega pups had shied away from her, muttering about sparks in her fingers, about shadows twisting unnaturally when she cried. And the alphas, they had looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear. A mixture she would never forget. One of them, an elder named Kale, had knelt before her, his eyes soft, almost tender, and whispered, "The silver flame is yours, Rory. It chooses you." But that whisper had been drowned out by the roar of the pack's condemnation. The memory twisted sharply in her mind, the shame, the isolation, the suffocating rejection pressing down like snow on her chest. She had been sent out, forced into exile, a lone Omega in a world that feared what it could not control. She had wandered for years, learning to survive in silence, in shadows, in the spaces between life and death. Every scratch, every wound, every scar had reminded her of that day. Every failure, every burst of uncontrollable power, every spark of fire that flared when she least expected it reminded her she was different, dangerous, wanted. And yet here she was, still alive, still burning, still standing. And beside her, moving like a shadow with purpose and control, was Grayson Wolfe. Her thoughts twisted with him. She wanted to push him away. She wanted to tell herself he was just another alpha, just another figure of power she couldn't trust. But she couldn't. His presence was different. Solid. Grounding. And more than that, he understood. There was something in the way he moved, the way he observed her, that told her he knew pain, loss, and secrets heavier than words could carry. Rory's fingers tingled as her silver fire flickered again, responding to the tension in her chest. She hadn't allowed anyone this close in years, not since the exile, not since the fire had become a weapon she couldn't control. She remembered the night it had almost destroyed a village, the night she had to run before she burned everything she loved to ash. Every flashback cut like a knife, but beneath the fear, beneath the guilt, there was a flicker of pride. That fire had saved her too, had kept her alive, had made her strong. And yet she doubted it. Always doubted it. Because every time she felt its heat, she remembered the way it had isolated her, the way people had turned away, the way love had never lasted when it touched her skin. Power, she had learned, was both gift and curse. And sometimes the curse came first. Grayson's voice, when he finally spoke, was low, careful, cutting through the storm's roar. "Rory," he said, softer than the wind, "you don't have to hide from it." The words struck her, a jolt that made her pause mid-step. She didn't know if he meant her fire or her past, her exile, her fear. Maybe both. And in that pause, the forest seemed to lean closer, listening, holding its breath. Her pulse hammered in her ears, and she realized something that had been buried beneath fear for years. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could accept all of her. Her mind drifted again, sliding into memory like a river over rocks. The whispers of the prophecy came back. Words she had been too young to understand, words she had tried to bury beneath survival and exile. "The Omega of Silver Flame will awaken the Alpha King," they had said. At the time she had thought it was nonsense. Superstition. Something adults told frightened children to keep them in line. But now, watching Grayson move, seeing the way he carried himself with the weight of centuries, she couldn't shake it. Maybe it wasn't nonsense. Maybe she was exactly what they said she was. And that terrified her. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, curled under frost-laden trees, fire in her hands, wondering if she would ever belong. If she could ever belong. If the world would ever accept her. Or if she was doomed to wander it, a spark of destruction no one could contain. Every shadow she had ever seen, every predator she had ever faced, every wolf she had ever heard whispering her name in accusation, they all reminded her of the same thing. She was alone. And yet, beside her, Grayson moved silently, watching the forest, watching her. He didn't offer judgment. He didn't flinch. He simply was. And that was more than Rory had dared to hope for in decades. More than hope. It stirred something buried in her chest, a warmth she had forgotten existed. Connection. The hint of trust. And the faint, dangerous thrill of desire. Rory's mind raced with conflicting emotions. She wanted to pull back, to stay safe in the shadows, to guard herself against the inevitable hurt she had known all her life. And yet she wanted to lean in, to step closer, to let herself be seen. To let someone into the fire that lived inside her. Her silver flames danced, responding to the turmoil inside her. Tiny sparks leapt from her fingers, reflecting in Grayson's amber eyes. And for a heartbeat she almost reached out, almost let herself touch him, almost let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, this alpha could see her, all of her, and not recoil. But doubt returned, sharp and bitter. How could she trust him? How could she trust anyone? Her fire had destroyed everything she loved. Her exile had shown her that the world feared her. And yet, the pull toward him, the instinct, the unspoken connection, told her something she hadn't felt in years, that maybe trust wasn't impossible. Maybe it was dangerous, but maybe for the first time it was worth it. Rory drew in a shaky breath, tasting the storm, the snow, the fire in her own hands, the weight of her past pressing against her chest. She had survived this long alone. She had endured the cold, the rejection, the isolation. She had carried her fire, her pain, and her guilt through years of exile. And now, walking beside Grayson Wolfe, she realized something terrifyingly beautiful. Survival alone wasn't enough anymore. She wanted something more. She wanted connection, understanding, maybe even love. The forest stretched endlessly around them, shadowed and silent, the storm still raging. Yet in that silence, in that shared moment between predator and prey, between survivor and alpha, Rory Kane allowed herself the barest flicker of hope. Not certainty, not safety, not yet. But hope. And that spark, fragile and dangerous and alive, was enough to make her step forward, just one more step into the unknown. Because she couldn't turn back. Not now. Not ever. And as Grayson walked beside her, the weight of centuries in his stride, the intensity in his gaze, the pull of something she didn't fully understand, Rory felt it. The first stirring of something she hadn't dared to feel in a long, long time. Power, yes. Danger, yes. Fear, yes. But also, possibility. Possibility that she might finally belong. Possibility that she might finally be seen. Possibility that the fire she had carried alone for so long might not have to burn alone anymore. And with that thought, Rory Kane stepped deeper into the night, into the storm, into a future she couldn't yet see but somehow already felt coursing through her veins. The forest waited, the shadows watched, and somewhere in the distance, the whisper of destiny lingered on the wind. The storm finally began to ease as they reached the edge of Moonshadow Forest, the trees thinning into a clearing that seemed untouched by time. Snow swirled lightly here, dancing in the moonlight like silver dust, and the air held a stillness that made Rory's pulse race even faster. Every instinct told her to be cautious. This was no ordinary place, but she couldn't look away. Something about the forest beyond the last ridge hummed with a strange, almost imperceptible energy, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Grayson stopped at the threshold of a rocky outcrop, tall and imposing, half buried beneath moss and centuries of snow. Carved into the stone were intricate runes, glowing faintly in the dim light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Rory's breath caught. Her silver fire surged in response, flickering along her arms like restless spirits. The markings weren't random. They were alive in a way she had never experienced before, moving, shifting, resonating with a rhythm that called to something deep inside her. This place, Grayson murmured, voice low and reverent, is older than any living pack. It's where the Alpha Kings of old, those who shaped the world, rest. It's where the prophecy began long before either of us were born. Rory's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Prophecy. She had spent her life trying to ignore it, trying to run from it. The whispers, the warnings, the silver flame, always hovering just beyond her control, had marked her as different, feared, dangerous. And yet, standing before the tomb, seeing the flicker of runes that seemed to respond to her presence, she felt a pull she couldn't resist. "You're the Omega," Grayson said almost in a whisper, yet every word carried weight, shaking the air between them. "The Omega who wields the silver flame. You are the one the old kings spoke of. The one who will awaken me." Rory swallowed dry, her throat tight. "Awaken you?" she echoed, voice barely audible. "I don't even know if I can control this fire, Grayson. I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for anything." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he guided her slowly into the clearing, eyes scanning the perimeter as if shadows themselves might leap from the past to strike. "Ready?" he finally said, soft, but with a certainty that cut through her fear like sunlight through fog. "No one ever is, Rory. You will never feel ready. You will only know when it is necessary. And it is necessary now." The walls of the tomb came into view as they entered the clearing. Ancient stones, etched with runes that glowed softly, surrounded a doorway framed by silver filigree that shimmered as though alive. Rory's chest constricted. The symbols on the stones pulsed in harmony with her own fire. She could feel them whispering to her, urging her closer. Ghostly shapes flickered in the corners of her vision. Wolves, pale and translucent, pacing, circling, guarding, guiding. Echoes of past Alpha Kings whispered from the shadows, murmuring in languages older than the forest, older than the world she had known. Rory's hands rose instinctively, silver flames dancing, matching the light of the runes. The energy hummed against her skin, coaxing, pulling, teasing. Fear clawed at her, but beneath it, a pulse of exhilaration surged. This was why she had survived. This was why she had endured every exile, every scar, every lonely night. The fire inside her was not a curse, it was a call. It was hers, and now for the first time she understood that it had a purpose. Grayson stepped closer, his presence a steady anchor amid the swirling energy. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice soft, almost more to himself than to her. "The kings are watching. They've been waiting for you." Rory's eyes roamed the glowing runes, tracing the ancient markings, feeling their pulse in her bones. Her stomach twisted with uncertainty. I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice trembling. "What if I fail? What if I hurt someone?" "Then you will try again," Grayson said firmly, amber eyes locking onto hers. "You don't have to be perfect, Rory. None of them were. Power is never perfect. Power is dangerous, wild. It's in what you do with it that defines you." The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, yet they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She had done damage before. She had lost control before. Could she truly rise to this? And yet, beneath that doubt was a deeper, more insistent voice. He had to. A soft wind rustled the trees, carrying whispers that seemed almost human in cadence, urging her forward. Rory took a tentative step closer to the tomb, the silver fire in her hands dancing higher, reacting to the pull of the runes. Shapes in the shadows flickered, ghostly wolves, pale as moonlight, circling the tomb in reverence as though acknowledging her presence, acknowledging her potential. "Do you see them?" Grayson asked quietly, his gaze scanning the spectral wolves. "The kings didn't just pass on their strength. They left it here, waiting for the one who could wield it." Rory's pulse quickened. Her hands trembled, her legs ached, and the memories of exile, rejection, and fear rose in her chest like a tide threatening to drown her. She wanted to retreat, to deny the fire, to run back into the storm where at least fear was familiar. And yet she didn't. Every nerve in her body, every instinct she had honed through years of survival, screamed that this was where she was meant to be. The tomb's doorway loomed before her, etched in silver light, runes glowing brighter as she stepped closer. She could almost hear the whispers, the prophecies repeating in her mind. "The Omega who wields the silver flame shall awaken the Alpha King." The words resonated through her bones, vibrating with a power she had never felt before. The energy wrapped around her, suffused her, and for a fleeting heartbeat Rory allowed herself to believe. Her mind flashed with visions, flashes of past Alpha Kings, tall and imposing, their amber eyes burning with knowledge and experience, their forms flickering between man and wolf, powerful and commanding. They weren't judgmental. They weren't angry. They were expectant, watching, waiting for her to step into her destiny. And somehow, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, she felt welcomed. Ready in ways she hadn't imagined. Grayson's voice brought her back from the visions, steady and grounding. "You're not alone in this, Rory. You have me. You have the fire. And you have the blood of all who came before. You don't need to be afraid." The words echoed in her chest, harmonizing with the pulse of the tomb, with the silver flames flickering along her skin. Every instinct, every memory, every fear warred with the surge of power, and yet, amidst the chaos, a strange calm settled over her. She was standing on the threshold of something vast, ancient, and terrifying. Something that demanded courage, demanded faith, demanded surrender. And yet, it also demanded her. A faint whisper of wind carried the voice of the prophecy again, faint but clear. "The Omega of silver flame shall awaken the Alpha King." And this time Rory didn't recoil. This time she didn't turn away. She inhaled sharply, feeling the cold bite of snow on her cheeks, the hum of energy beneath her skin, the steady weight of Grayson beside her. And for the first time Rory Kane allowed herself to step forward, not just physically but fully into the moment, into the power that had been waiting for her all along. The fire within her pulsed higher, stronger, responding to the runes, to the ghosts, to the pull of destiny. She didn't know how it would unfold. She didn't know what awaited her inside the tomb. But she knew one thing: she was ready to find out. The ancient stones awaited. The kings of old watched. The prophecy called. And in the stillness of Moonshadow Forest, amidst snow, wind, and silver light, Rory Kane stood on the brink of awakening. Her destiny was beginning. Rory's heart pounded against her ribs as she and Grayson stepped closer to the tomb, the silver runes glowing brighter with every tentative step. Her fire flickered restlessly, sensing the pulse of destiny and danger intertwining, but she pushed forward, gripping the edge of her fear like a lifeline. The forest had grown unervingly silent, a tension in the air so thick it pressed against her chest, making every breath a labor. And then the calm shattered. A low, guttural growl rolled through the clearing, carrying a weight that made Rory's knees threaten to buckle. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and imposing, radiating dominance and malice. Alpha Dante Storm, leader of the Ironfang Pack, stepped into the clearing, his eyes burning with fury and ancient prejudice. Behind him, shapes moved like smoke, coalescing into shadow beasts, spectral wolves twisted by dark intent, eyes glowing red as they stalked closer. Every instinct Rory had honed in years of exile screamed at her to run, yet her body refused to obey. Rory Kane, Dante's voice was sharp, commanding, slicing through the charged air. You dare approach the tomb? You, the harbinger of doom, the Omega who will destroy us all. Rory's pulse spiked, her silver fire flaring instinctively, licking the air in dangerous tendrils. Her mind screamed that this was wrong, that accusations shouldn't hurt this deeply, but they did. Every word struck like a blade, each one echoing the judgments she had spent a lifetime running from. And beneath the fear, a surge of rage ignited in her chest. She wouldn't be condemned. Not again. Grayson stepped forward, placing himself between Rory and Dante, his presence radiating authority, warning the shadow beasts back with a subtle shift in his stance. But Rory could see the conflict in his eyes. Centuries of leadership pressed against centuries of instinct, the weight of his pack's loyalty balancing on the edge of his patience. He had to choose. Pack or Rory. And that choice would define them both. The first shadow beast lunged. Rory barely had time to react. Instinct, fear, and the pulse of her silver fire surged in a violent symphony. She raised her hands and light erupted like a living thing, silver flames dancing and snapping in response to the attack. The beast yelped, recoiling as if scorched, and Rory realized with a jolt that she had saved Grayson, but at a cost. The flames had left a scorch across the forest floor, a testament to the power she barely controlled. Trees smoked, branches snapped, the ground scorched in eerie silver patterns. Dante's roar filled the air, angry, accusatory. She cannot be tamed. She is a weapon of chaos. Rory felt the weight of centuries of fear and blame pressing down on her, but she forced herself to stand tall, though her legs trembled. Grayson's amber eyes met hers, a mixture of awe, worry, and unspoken connection. He didn't speak. Words would have been useless here. Instead, his gaze anchored her, reminding her that in the chaos she was not alone. Yet the battle continued. Shadow beasts surged forward, grotesque shapes blending with the night. Rory dodged, pivoted, her silver fire flaring and ebbing with her pulse, responding to her emotional tides. Every movement was instinct, every strike measured, but the forest itself seemed to tremble in response. Snow swirled violently, carrying the scent of ozone and fear, and Rory felt herself at the center of a storm far bigger than she had anticipated. Grayson fought alongside her, shifting between man and wolf, his power precise, devastating, controlled. Yet he did not touch her fire, did not attempt to dominate it. He respected it, even as the beasts surged, even as Dante screamed his warnings. And in that respect, Rory felt something she hadn't felt in years: acknowledgement. Not fear. Not condemnation. Understanding. But understanding could not shield her from consequence. The battle reached a fever pitch, Rory's fire colliding with shadow beasts, Grayson moving like liquid steel beside her, and Dante's rage cutting through the chaos. In a moment she barely understood, Rory unleashed a pulse of silver fire, raw and unrestrained. It surged outward, scattering the shadow beasts, burning the ground, lighting the forest with a blinding glow. Grayson shielded his eyes instinctively, and when they reopened, the clearing was quiet, except for Rory trembling, smoke curling from her hands, her chest heaving. The devastation was immediate. Trees lay scorched, snow melted into steamy puddles, the ground blackened and silver-etched in strange patterns. The shadow beasts were gone, driven off by the sheer force of her unrefined power, but the silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Rory felt a pang of guilt, an ache that cut deeper than the physical strain. She had saved Grayson, but at what cost? Dante Storm's gaze was fixed on her, hatred burning like wildfire. "You think your power redeems you?" he spat. "You are a curse. A monster no pack should tolerate." Rory wanted to answer, wanted to fight back with words, with fire, with fury, but the battle had drained her. Her silver fire flickered, trembling like a fragile ember in her hands. And in that flicker she realized a bitter truth. The world would never accept her, not fully, not easily. She had power, yes. But that power brought isolation. It brought fear. It brought enemies. Grayson stepped beside her, steady, unshaken, his gaze fixed on her. "Rory," he said softly, voice carrying through the aftermath, "come with me. We'll regroup. But you stay with me. Not because I need to protect you, but because you are not alone." Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat Rory allowed herself to hope. And then reality slammed back. Dante's final words, like jagged glass, pierced her thoughts. "Mark my words, Alpha Wolf. Align with her and you will lose everything." Grayson's jaw tightened, a silent struggle between loyalty to his pack and the undeniable pull toward Rory. The air between them crackled with tension, unresolved, fragile, and impossible to ignore. Rory felt it too. The trust they had built, the tentative connection forming in the firelight, now tested to its absolute limit. The clearing seemed to stretch endlessly, the snow falling softly again, but the danger lingered in every shadow, every rustle of the wind. Rory felt the weight of choice pressing against her chest. Retreat or fight. Trust or isolation. Power or safety. And in that moment the unspoken truth between her and Grayson was undeniable. They were being pulled apart by forces neither of them could yet control. As they slowly backed from the tomb, separated but not broken, Rory caught a final glimpse of Grayson's gaze. Fierce, protective, haunted by centuries of regret, yet unwilling to abandon her. And she understood with a clarity that frightened her, that the path ahead would be impossible, dangerous, and consuming. But it was theirs. And as they disappeared into the forest in opposite directions, Rory Kane felt her fire pulse in her chest, fierce, untamed, alive, and knew that this was only the beginning. The world had pushed back, yes. It had tested her. It had threatened everything she held dear. And yet she had survived. She had risen. She had burned. And the next time they met, the stakes would be even higher. The forest had quieted, the chaos of the battle now only a memory carried by the wind, curling through frost-laden trees. Snow fell softly, blanketing the clearing in a fragile white silence that pressed around Rory like a protective shroud. She limped alongside Grayson, each step a reminder of her exhaustion, each breath still jagged from the surge of silver fire and adrenaline. The storm had passed, but it had left a residue in the air, charged, heavy, filled with the scent of rain, smoke, and something primal she couldn't name. Grayson guided her to a cave nestled along the edge of a cliff, the mouth of it wide enough to shelter them, the walls smooth and cold beneath the pale moonlight spilling inside. Rory's body ached, her muscles screaming for rest, yet her mind raced. Every brush of Grayson's hand as he helped steady her, every cautious glance toward the shadows, ignited sparks she couldn't ignore. There was an intensity about him that pressed against her own rhythm, and for the first time in years, Rory felt her walls begin to tremble. Inside, the air was still, the only sound the soft hiss of snow melting against the rocks outside and their synchronized breathing. Grayson knelt beside her, inspecting the bruises and scratches left by the battle, his fingers brushing lightly over her skin. Each touch sent a shiver through her spine, a mix of fear, anticipation, and longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "You were reckless," he said softly, voice low, threaded with something between admonishment and awe. "Your power. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Rory's jaw tightened, a mix of pride and guilt tightening her chest. It nearly destroyed everything, she admitted, voice trembling raw. Her fingers curled into the hem of her cloak, unsure how to put centuries of fear, exile, and isolation into words. I can't. I don't know if I can control it. I've never been able to fully control it. Grayson's eyes softened, amber glowing faintly in the moonlight. I know, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I've seen power like yours before, Rory. It's dangerous, yes. Unpredictable. But it's also beautiful. And it's yours. The honesty in his words, the way he acknowledged her fear without judging it, made Rory's chest ache with something she hadn't named in years. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance that had formed over centuries of mistrust and pain. She wanted to believe that someone could see all of her, the fire, the scars, the exile, and still stay. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke, barely audible over the soft hum of the cave. I've lived my life alone. I've been hunted, cast out. I've hurt people I cared about without meaning to. And yet I feel safe with you. But I don't know if I can trust that feeling. Grayson shifted closer, close enough that the warmth of his presence brushed against hers, but still careful, respectful. You don't have to trust immediately, he said softly, amber eyes never leaving hers. Trust isn't demanded. It's earned. And I will earn it, Rory. Every day. Every moment. If you let me. Rory's breath caught. The fire within her flickered, responding not to danger but to desire. She wanted to lean into him, to close the small distance that remained, but fear gripped her like a vice. What if he leaves? What if he regrets staying? What if I destroy him? Yet Grayson's hand reached out, brushing hers ever so lightly, and the contact was electric. Fingers touched, barely grazing, but sparks of something neither entirely physical nor wholly emotional leapt between them. Rory's pulse quickened, and for the first time in a long time, the weight of her past lifted, if only slightly, under the intensity of connection she hadn't allowed herself to feel. You see me, she whispered, barely audible, heart hammering against her chest. All of me. Grayson's gaze softened further, unwavering. I see you. All of you, he said, voice low, carrying a promise she couldn't yet name but instinctively understood. The fire. The fear. The exile. The strength you don't even realize you have. I see it, Rory. The words reverberated in her chest, awakening a yearning she had suppressed for years. She had believed connection, love, trust, all of it, was a luxury she could never afford. And yet, sitting there in the moonlit cave, listening to the quiet hum of the forest beyond, feeling the warmth of Grayson so close, she realized she craved it. Desperately. Silence stretched between them, heavy but charged, until Rory's hand twitched almost instinctively toward his. Their fingers brushed again, more deliberately this time, the contact electric, drawing a shiver up her spine and setting her silver fire flickering in her veins. She could feel him near and present, yet full of restraint, the tension between them almost unbearable in its intensity. You don't have to do this alone, Grayson murmured, voice soft, intimate, yet carrying the weight of centuries of battles, betrayals, and loss. I've walked through centuries of shadows. I've fought wars you can't imagine, lost people you'll never know, but I will not abandon you, Rory. Not now, not ever. Her chest tightened, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Rage at the world that had cast her out, grief for the years she had spent alone, awe at the intensity of the moment, and a hunger for connection she had denied herself, all coalesced into a single impossible pulse of sensation. She wanted to speak, to shout, to scream, but the only sound that emerged was a quiet intake of breath, shaky and trembling. Grayson moved just a fraction closer, and Rory felt the pull of inevitability, a magnetic draw she had never experienced with anyone. Her fingers twitched toward his face, his arm, his chest, but fear made her stop, hesitation making the moment taut with possibility. She could feel the brush of his skin, the warmth of his body, and the hum of centuries of experience and survival radiating off him like an aura. And yet she hesitated. Trust was fragile. Connection was dangerous. Fire, hers and theirs, could ignite at any moment. She wasn't sure she could survive fully letting him in. But the pull was irresistible. Grayson's eyes softened further, amber and luminous, and his hand hovered near hers, a whisper of intent, a promise, an offering. Rory, he said, voice low, intimate, almost a caress against her ear. You don't have to decide tonight. But I want you to know this. Whatever comes, I will not leave. I will not look away. I will not fear your fire. I see all of you. And I am here. Her heart thudded violently against her ribs. The storm of emotion, the surge of power, the ache of isolation, the taste of longing, all collided in a moment so charged she thought she might shatter. And in that moment, for a heartbeat, it was just them, two souls scarred by time, danger and destiny, finding fragile connection amid the silence of the moonlit cave. Rory's fire flickered in response, warm and alive, matching the rhythm of her pulse. She wanted to lean in, to let herself trust, to let herself fall even just a little. And for a moment the ache of years, the loneliness, the fear of rejection, it all seemed to fade. Their fingers brushed again, closer, electric, and Rory realized the truth that had been growing in her chest for a long time. Trust wasn't about perfection. Trust wasn't about certainty. It was about courage. The courage to let someone see you, all of you, and the courage to accept that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't turn away. The fire within her surged, not destructive, not angry, but alive, vibrant, tethered to her emotions in a way that was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Anne Grayson, standing beside her, seemed to recognize it, responding with a subtle shift, a quiet acknowledgement that this moment, fragile and fleeting, mattered. For the first time in a long time, Rory Kane allowed herself to feel possibility. Possibility that she could belong. Possibility that she could trust. Possibility that she could let someone into the fire she had carried alone for so long. And in the silence of that moonlit cave, amidst snow, stone and silver light, the first stirrings of connection deepened. A tether between two souls scarred by history, danger and destiny, fragile yet unbreakable, waiting for the next storm to test its strength. The tranquility of the moonlit cave shattered faster than snow in a summer storm. Rory had allowed herself a few precious hours of trust, of warmth, of connection with Grayson. Moments where fear and loneliness had been replaced by something fragile, something she had almost convinced herself she could call hope. But hope, Rory realized, was a dangerous luxury in a world that had spent centuries waiting to betray her. Celine Vexley appeared suddenly, stepping through the cave's mouth like a shadow with teeth. Her eyes gleamed with something cold, calculating and triumphant. Rory's stomach sank instantly. She knew that look, she had seen it in pack councils, in hunters' eyes, in whispers behind closed doors. The look of someone who wanted to see her fall. Everyone listened closely. Celine's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, echoing against the stone walls. You all have been deceived. Rory Kane is not who you think she is. The Omega with the silver flame. The harbinger the prophecy warned us about. She's not safe. She's dangerous. And she will bring ruin to all of us if she is allowed to remain among us. Rory froze, her chest tightening as though the words had clawed their way into her ribcage. The fire inside her surged, her silver flames flickering wildly across her skin, responding instinctively to the rising tension, the threat, the betrayal. She could feel every pair of eyes in the cave turning toward her, some with fear, some with suspicion, others with unmasked disdain. Grayson stepped in front of her immediately, his body a shield, eyes flashing amber in the moonlight. Rory, he began, voice taut, restraining both warning and anger, but the words caught in his throat. He had already known that the world would fear her. But hearing the accusations spoken aloud, seeing allies falter, watching those he had trusted look at her with doubt, he felt the weight of centuries pressing down, threatening to crush them both. You will not stand alone, he said, voice low, firm, trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. I will not allow them to judge you without knowing the truth. But truth, Rory realized bitterly, didn't matter here. Fear was louder, and Celine's manipulation had already done its work. Friends she had thought loyal, allies she had fought beside, began to murmur. Whispers like knives slicing through the air. She is too dangerous. She will destroy us. He cannot be trusted. Each word landed like a blow, igniting fury and heartbreak in equal measure. The fire within Rory surged, untamed, responding to both the betrayal and the fear surrounding her. Silver flames licked out across her arms, her hair, the floor of the cave, bright and angry, illuminating the terrified faces around her. You don't understand, she shouted, voice raw, trembling with both fear and power. I am not your weapon. I am not your curse. I am me. Her words were met with silence at first, but then the murmurs grew louder, accusations sharpening. Panic clawed at her chest. She had spent a lifetime hiding, running, controlling herself, and yet here it was, the world recoiling at her very existence. The fire responded, wild and brilliant, and Rory realized in a moment of horrifying clarity that she had lost control. The walls of the cave trembled under the force of her unleashed power, silver flames dancing dangerously along the stone, reflecting in Grayson's eyes. He reached out, voice breaking through the chaos. "Rory, stop. Control it. You are stronger than this." But control was gone. The flames rose higher, coiling like serpents, licking at the stone, threatening everything in the confined space. The pack members who had once been her friends stumbled backward, fear etched in every line of their faces. Rory's heart pounded painfully, not from fear of the fire but from the betrayal, the hurt, the realization that even now, even after everything, the world would not accept her. Tears burned her eyes as she turned toward Grayson, voice breaking. I can't be safe. Not here, not with them." She felt a tear slip down her cheek, her silver fire flaring around it, tiny sparks dancing on her skin. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her power was magnificent, breathtaking, a force of life and destruction, but it was also the very reason she could never belong. Grayson's gaze softened, but his body tensed, torn between loyalty to the pack and the pull toward her. "Rory, his words faltered. Even he could not stop what was coming. And then she ran. Rory fled from the cave, the silver fire trailing behind her in brilliant arcs, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. Branches cracked underfoot, snow exploded in small clouds with every step, and the wind carried the sound of her rage and heartbreak into the night. She ran not only to escape the pack, not only to save Grayson from her uncontrolled power, but to save herself, from their judgment, from their fear, from the world that had never truly wanted her. Every step carried a promise, whispered into the wind with trembling lips and clenched fists. "I will master this. I will control my fire. And I will return. Not as someone to be feared, but as someone unstoppable." Grayson emerged from the cave moments later, moving faster than thought, but she was already gone, swallowed by the forest, silver flames fading into the shadows. His heart clenched, torn between fury and despair, knowing that the separation was necessary to protect her, yet hating every second of it. Behind him, Celine Vexley watched with a triumphant smirk, believing the pack's divisions had been cemented, believing Rory's power would now be her undoing. She could not see the truth, the unyielding spirit, the fire that refused to be tamed, the Omega who would rise stronger than ever, fueled by betrayal and heartbreak. Rory disappeared into the storm-lashed forest, her silver fire a fading pulse in the night, her heart a chaotic storm of anger, sorrow, and determination. She had lost, yes, but only in the moment, only in the shadows of fear and mistrust. And somewhere deep inside, a vow had crystallized. She would return. She would reclaim control over her power, and she would take revenge. Not out of cruelty, but as a testament to her survival, her strength, and the love she had begun to allow herself to feel. The night swallowed her, but the fire within her would never be extinguished. And as the echoes of betrayal faded, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the Omega of silver flame to rise again. Rory emerged from the edge of the forest like a storm incarnate. The night had grown darker, the wind sharper, carrying the scent of snow, ozone, and something far older than the world itself. Her silver fire pulsed along her veins, a living, untamed entity, echoing the fury, heartbreak, and determination that had been forged in betrayal. Every tree, every branch, every shadow seemed to recoil before her presence. She was no longer the frightened Omega fleeing the cave. She was the storm, the flame, the reckoning itself. The ritual clearing lay before her. Dante Storm and his minions surrounded the ceremonial circle, their eyes fixed on the bound wolves at the center. Fear and arrogance radiated from them, a miscalculation that made Rory's pulse spike. The night had grown eerily still, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath. Snow fell in soft, silent sheets, dusting the ruins and fallen branches in a pale, ghostly light. The echoes of battle lingered in the air, the crackle of silver fire, the shudder of earth, the faint whispers of spirits. But for the first time Rory stood unchallenged, unbroken, yet not entirely at peace. She looked toward Grayson, and in his amber eyes she saw the reflection of all she had endured: fear, exile, betrayal, longing, and now triumph. Yet triumph felt hollow, fleeting, because the world beyond this clearing was still uncertain, still waiting to judge, still waiting to betray. And as her gaze swept across the forest, Rory felt the weight of the question that had haunted her for centuries pressing down. Does anyone truly see me? The silver fire along her arms dimmed slightly, responding to her inner conflict. Her heart still raced, not from danger now, but from the storm of emotion roiling inside her. Rage at the betrayals, heartbreak at the pack's fear, awe at the magnitude of her power, and a tender, fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she could be more than a harbinger, more than a weapon, more than a cursed flame. And then the question rose, unbidden, impossible to ignore. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? She imagined the pack, the hunters, the countless eyes that had once looked at her with suspicion, fear, or disdain. Would they have seen her for who she truly was? The Omega who bore the silver flame, the girl who had survived exile, heartbreak, betrayal, and still rose? Or would they have flinched at the light she carried, the fire that would not be contained, the power they could not comprehend? Her gaze drifted to Grayson, standing solid and unwavering beside her, the alpha who had not turned away, who had chosen to see all of her, even when the world would not. He chose me, she thought, the words tasting strange yet comforting on her tongue. He sees me. And maybe that is enough, for now. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echoes of shadow from the battle, reminders that this night, this victory, was temporary. The ultimate villain had not been vanquished completely. The forest still whispered of unseen threats, ancient prophecies yet unfulfilled, and destinies yet to collide. And so the question lingered, haunting in the chill of the moonlit night. Is she a hero, or just a girl cursed with too much fire? Rory raised her chin, letting the silver light from her fire shimmer across her face, illuminating the determination in her eyes. There was defiance there, yes, but also vulnerability, a raw openness that few had ever witnessed. She would continue to fight, to rise, to claim her destiny, but the world would have to make its choice first. The forest exhaled around her, and for a brief, shimmering heartbeat, all was quiet. And then, as if carried by the wind itself, a voice seemed to whisper across the ruins, brushing against the edges of thought and memory. Choose wisely. This fire burns differently for each heart. If this story lit something inside you, if Rory's struggle, her power, her heartbreak and courage stirred a spark in your chest, then step forward. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. Here we tell tales that burn. Here we tell tales where hearts ache, where love and fire collide, where heroes rise from the ashes of betrayal. Step inside the world where Rory Kane and her silver flame shine, where every whisper, every heartbeat, every ember matters. The night held her in suspense, shadows shifting, silver light shimmering, leaving the listener with a question that refused to fade. Whose side would you have chosen? Would you have stood with her, or turned away in fear? And even as the wind carried that question into the trees, one truth remained undeniable. Rory Kane had claimed her power, but the story was far from over. Rory's steps were heavy, each one echoing against the frost-covered earth beneath the canopy of the Moonshadow Forest. The battle had ended, yet exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, wet with sweat, silver fire lingering as a soft glow along her arms and neck. She could feel every muscle screaming in protest, every heartbeat pounding like a war drum, and still she walked. Still she moved forward, because standing still meant facing the weight of her own choices, and she was no longer willing to let fear define her. Grayson trailed beside her, silent, unwavering, his presence both shield and anchor. He had fought beside her, bled beside her, witnessed the storm of her power, and had not flinched. The amber of his eyes reflected the faint shimmer of her silver fire, warmth against the creeping chill of the night. Even in exhaustion there was strength in him, and she leaned on it without shame. The mist thickened around them, curling through skeletal branches like ancient spirits observing the living. Every step forward was a test, each snap of twig or rush of wind a reminder that the world was not done with them. Rory's senses, honed over years of exile, were alive to every sound, every shadow. She could feel the remnants of the battle still clinging to the forest, the lingering dark energy of defeated foes, the echoes of ancestral spirits whispering their caution and admiration, even the tremor of the earth beneath her feet. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the ground shifted. A subtle tremor ran beneath them, rattling loose stones and scattering frost along the forest floor. Rory paused, silver fire flaring instinctively along her hands. Her gaze swept the mist, searching, sensing, instinctively aware that this tremor was not natural. A voice, low, hollow and threaded with power, slithered through the trees. It was neither male nor female, neither wholly mortal nor entirely spirit. "She is not the only one," it whispered, carried on the wind, curling around the fog, brushing against Rory's ears with a promise of danger yet to come. The words wrapped themselves around her heart, a cold thrill of dread mixed with anticipation. Grayson stiffened beside her, growling softly, muscles tensing as the shadowed voice echoed again. "Not alone," he repeated as if tasting the words and weighing their meaning. His hand brushed hers, not demanding, not commanding, just a quiet reassurance that they were together, yet the world beyond the mist was still theirs to face. Rory felt a ripple of unease. The tremor and the voice were signs, omens, warnings. She could feel power gathering beyond the forest, ancient energy stirring like a predator awakened. More omegas, she realized, perhaps hidden like her, waiting to emerge. Ancient alphas, dormant yet formidable, sensing the resurgence of the silver flame. Destinies untamed, colliding, waiting to ignite into something catastrophic, or magnificent. And yet, even with the uncertainty pressing against her, a pulse of clarity ran through her. She had survived betrayal. She had claimed her power. She had fought and stood victorious when the world expected her to crumble. Whatever was waiting beyond the mist, she would face it, not as a frightened girl exiled from her clan, not as a pawn of prophecy, but as Rory Kane, Omega of the Silver Flame, tempered in fire, unstoppable, unbroken. The forest seemed to respond, mist parting slightly as if bowing to her presence. The ruins they had left behind glowed faintly, faint silver light lingering like the memory of a war well fought. And yet the whispers persisted, carried on the wind, teasing her with possibility, threat and destiny. The true alpha hasn't risen, yet. Rory tightened her fists, letting the silver fire dance along her fingers. She could feel it humming with anticipation, ready to answer any threat, ready to protect the innocents, ready to face destiny head-on. The wind carried the scent of new challenges, the faintest trace of danger and the thrill of battle yet to come. Grayson stepped closer, his presence anchoring her, his voice low and steady. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Rory nodded, letting herself absorb the weight and warmth of his words. She didn't need to see the threat to know it was coming, nor did she need to fear it. Because she had fire, she had strength, and she had someone who had chosen her, truly seen her, in a world that had tried to crush her. And as they walked, side by side, through the misty forest, the shadows of unseen enemies shifted, ancient eyes watching, waiting, knowing that the rise of the Omega of Silver Flame was only the beginning. The tremors underfoot grew faintly stronger, subtle hints that the next saga had already begun. The moon shone coldly through the mist, illuminating a path filled with both promise and peril. Rory breathed deeply, silver fire shimmering in her veins, and knew this truth. She would never be a sacrifice. She would never be silenced. She would never be feared without reason. And when the time came, every hidden enemy, every shadowed threat, every ancient force standing against her would learn that the Omega of Silver Flame did not bow. And somewhere in the depths beyond the trees, a whisper carried through the forest, soft yet infinitely ominous. "This is only the beginning, the others will rise, the flames will spread, and destiny will demand a reckoning like no world has ever seen." Rory's lips curved into the smallest defiant smile. She did not yet know the full scope of what awaited her, but she felt it in every pulse of her fire, in every beat of her heart. She was ready. And her story was far from over.